Hey Guru Nation, welcome back to the clinicaltrialsguru.com. I'm Dan Sfera. I'm here with Daniel Regitt. Daniel is the CRA coach, and basically what he does is he takes your CRA job that you have and he eliminates all your stress, okay? All of it. So he's the stress reliever for CRAs. He's going to talk about how he does this. We're actually giving you guys and gals, CRAs out there that are already established CRAs, golden nuggets today of value bombs of what you can do to reduce stress, improve your productivity, write your trip reports faster, all that stuff. I'm personally interested. I do CRA visit every 6 weeks. I want to get through them also. So welcome, Daniel. How's it going?
Doing good, Dan. Doing good, Dan. Yeah, thanks for having me on again. And yeah, we've already done 2 interviews, and
Wow, two
a lot
already,
of
huh?
yeah, a lot of clients have reached out to me, and yeah, so I want to basically return the favor a little bit and put out some really unfiltered, unedited information from the coaching that I provide to CRAs. Like you pointed out, coaching, everybody here knows about CRA training. So what is coaching? And like you said correctly, my coaching really focuses on increasing productivity for CRAs. And what that translates to for you as a CRA means you get stuff done quicker, better, and that means you have more free time.
Oh, no
So
big deal. Just more time.
that's
You're just giving people more life.
yeah, that is exactly my point, and why I love doing it, because I really, and that's also on my website, thecracoach.com. Feel free to contact me there. You cannot overlook the contact button.
Okay.
Um, yeah, is really transforming CRAs. And one of those small parts well, it's not that a small part, it actually can have quite an impact, is about site file binder review. And I know when I take over sites from other CRAs quite often, or when I do an interim monitoring visit for them in between just to help out, and also from talking to other CRAs, it's sometimes stuff that's put on the back burner to actually review the site file binder completely. And in part, that's due because there's quite a lot of stuff to check there. I mean, are the investigator brochures filed and so forth and so on, and all the CVs and whatnot. So everybody's like, not really exactly my favorite task. So basically, how do I help CRAs overcome that and set up a process that is really quick and simple? And it's not going to start like sounding simple, but it will in the end. And the thing is, basically, if you think about what do you have to monitor as a CRA in the site file binder, when it comes to team members, and I actually really printed a list because I want
Okay.
anybody who's watching right now that you can actually really use this as pretty much a blueprint. So, I mean, wherever Dan uploads it, YouTube certainly, and wherever else, you can pause, you can rewind, go back, and this is going to be a pretty inclusive list that you can really work with. Um, so your team members, are they on the delegation log at a site? You have to check their last name, their first name, the role, when did they start? Do they perhaps have an end date because they're no longer at the site? Are they delegated IWRS tasks? That has implications for training records. They need to have reviewed the IWRS manual. Are they delegated IATA tasks? We need an IATA certificate. If so, are they delegated data entry? Then we need an EDC training documented for them, and CRF completion guidelines training, quite likely. And if there's an update, then version 2 training, version 3 training. Their GCP expiration dates, CVs, IATA expiration date, their EDC training documentation is something you want to look for. You want to cross-check who's on the FDA 1572. You want to check who has a financial disclosure form filed. Any license expiration dates you want to be aware of. I mean, they shouldn't have expired last week. Then we need a new one. And sometimes people that were not at the SIV but are team members need to review the SIV presentation. And when it comes to essential documents themselves in the binder, you need to ensure that the IB is filed, and not just one. If there's updated editions, then 2 and 3 and so forth. You need to know the version dates. You need to know who's reviewed it and the training documents that they themselves are filed. Same thing for protocols and all the amendments. Reviews and trainings on the protocol, are they filed? Same thing for every amendment. IWS manual, just touched on that. Is there a version 2, version 3, and so forth? You need all those version dates. You need to review the training documentation. Site operation manual, which is often provided. Versions may be updated, same thing there. Training documentation, who has that filed in the site file binder. The CRF completion guidelines that I just touched on, all those versions, are they filed? Is all the training of having reviewed them filed? All the informed consents that are used at the site, are they filed? Are all the IRB approvals for each of those consents filed? And all the monitoring letters, all the confirmation and all the follow-up letters, are they filed? Should they have dared to have sent out safety letters, are all of those safety letters filed at the site? And if somebody's gotten really creative and actually written up some newsletters, are those newsletters also filed at the site? And on top of that, obviously, there can be study-specific stuff. But this was a pretty concise overview over what, in general, you can expect in a site file binder. And I think because of this kind of overview, when you hear through it, you're like, yeah, that's exactly why I'm going to do that at IMV 2 or
Right.
3.
So what are you using? You're using a checklist that you made to go through this, basically, right? Because what I do, I just take the monitoring report and I go to the ISF section and I make sure everything on there. But then you're right, they always ask me something that I may not have checked. So it's always best to have a checklist like this, right?
My question, would be, do you need to know all that general information about your trial, like how many protocol amendments do we have, how many IB additions are out there? The answer is obviously yes. And then the other question is, do you need to verify all the training documents at a site at one point in time?
Yes.
Same answer, yes. Yes, so why would you not, and that's what I suggest, set up a form of tracker in your home office when you have time, where you track all of these things, because at one point in time you're going to have to know exactly what's the date of every amendment, what's the date of every IB, what's the date and version of every ICF. You're going to have to check that at one
What do
point
you
in time
use? Do you use
anyway.
Excel? Do you use an Excel sheet for that?
A combination, and a great part of it is Excel, obviously, because that allows you to filter and so forth. But put up some kind of a tracking system that works for you, where you have all that documented for your trial and pending fields for when I look at the site binder, here's where I'm going to enter the date of this CV. So I'm then going to also see at following visits when 2 years have passed and it's no longer valid. If you have to know all of these things at one point in time anyway, why not and do it? Set up a tool where you track all of this information only once from a protocol level, and then at the site you only have to document it once in whatever system you have, Excel, Word, whatever works for you. I recommend Excel when it comes to the training records. And do that, because that way you have something where you know, I'm going to have to check that anyway once, and this is exactly where I'm going to put all this information. Now, here is basically where the magic comes in. Once you've set up this tool, contrary to somebody else maybe who's looking through an investigator's site file, you just grab the binder and you start on page 1 and you work your way to page 2, page 3, page 4. No matter what you find in this binder, be it a protocol, be it an IATA certificate, be it whatever, you have a place where you want to track this now, right? Track it in there. Go through your binder, page by page by page by page by page. You hit the last page, bam, end of story. Now you look at your tool. Everything that's missing in there is missing in the binder. And you didn't have to waste 1 second of thought and 1 calorie of brain power. Our most important tool as CRAs, as I always tell my clients, your brain is your axe if you were a lumberjack.
So no
it's
more
your
going back and forth, fumbling through the sections. Oh, I forgot to look for this. You just page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Obviously, you could skip the protocol pages and the IB pages, but just make sure the signature stuff is in there and the new amendments, right? This is great. I'm going to be watching this prior to my next monitoring visit.
And everybody, again, guys and girls, just skip back to the beginning of the recording or minute 3 or whenever it was. I have no idea. And that's going to give you enough of an idea to set up basically your own tool for your trial. And then when you're at the site, you go through it. It is so much easier looking at every page and
Mm.
knowing I just have to focus on the quality of this page. Is the
Yeah.
CV handwritten with a handwritten date on it? And then on to the next. You can really focus on the quality of that document itself, and you're
Yeah.
not splitting your mind into. And then I also have to kind of keep an eye on, do we have all the CVs? Do we have all the GCP certificates? And so forth and so on. If you have a tool like an Excel spreadsheet, heck, when you're done with hitting the last page, filter for who was delegated lab tasks. Lab draws, they should have lab manual training. Who is delegated IATA tasks? Filter for those guys. Well, did I have IATA certificates for all of them? And so forth and so on. You can cross-filter and cross-check so much easier. And on top of that, when you write your trip report and your follow-up items, you just filter the
Mm.
IATA column, for example, where you didn't find any, just filter for blank or whatever you put in for I didn't find a document here, but I would have expected one. Filter for that, scroll over to your names and roles that you have, copy paste into your follow-up item.
So really, for this to work, you have to initially, when you're starting out, just get the delegation log and all the people on there with all their duties
Yeah, that's where I'd start
organized,
out.
right?
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
just transcribe all that essential information, and there's really only four things that you need to put into that kind of a tracker. Who is delegated IATA tasks? Who is delegated lab draws? Not always the same. Who is delegated data entry? And who is delegated IWRS tasks. Those are the four tasks that have training documentation implementations. For these four tasks, you're looking for an IATA certificate, IWRS manual review, EDC training, and whatnot. So those are and lab manual review. So those are the only things you really need to put into your tracker as extra columns that you pull out of the delegation log review, and then just go through the binder.
Hmm.
And when you're done, you're ready to go. So you, like you mentioned, you have all the work on the front end, which I get is kind of like a psychological hurdle. Shit, don't want to do that. I'm going to shoot from
Well,
the hip or whatever.
it's like telling people to save money so that they can have more later. You know, nobody wants the initial pain, but
Yeah,
your
but the
returns, you're
return
going to get returns.
and the return on investment is a hell of a lot quicker for this idea than waiting for retirement, I can promise you.
That's right.
And again, you're not documenting and looking up anything that you wouldn't have to at some other point in time anyway. You have to again need all the protocol and IWS manual versions, and you have to know what they are. And especially once you set up one tracker as a template, well, you can use it for your next site, can't you? I mean,
Yeah, you can. I just wish you can make it all in one form, though. Like, just have an Excel sheet.
mhm.
I'm sure you can, right? You can hack it.
I guess you could, yeah. I'll
Yeah.
leave that up to anybody's personal taste. And again, in my coaching program, if you like this, guys and girls, that's one of the parts. And I have a whole system of, you wouldn't imagine what else. I have a section
Wow.
I call the Jedi mind tricks. I'll set you up with a 360 degrees thing where, again, all of my clients come back to me, and I wouldn't be putting this out here on YouTube and into the world if it weren't true. All of my clients come back to me with feedback like, "Hey, man, this is really a time and lifesaver," and so forth and so
It's
on.
genius.
I'll I'll be happy to turn your life around if you are a CRA and you're experiencing stress. Again, my website, thecracoach.com. Hit me up, contact button. I'll set you up, and it's one weekend. It's a 2-day course, and I will get you there. There's
Wow.
so much other stuff that basically ties into one whole system, and just imagine each part of that. If it just reduces your stress and the time you need by 5%, the compound effect, easily 20-30% more efficiency, and what you do in 9 hours, you do in 7 hours, and it's the end of your workday. So
Yeah.
love to get you there. Whoever's interested, just let me know.
Yeah, and then
And
rather than quitting your job in 3 years, you may last 7 or 8
exactly. And
or longer.
yeah, exactly. And if you're completely sick of being a CRA at all, that's one thing that I wanted to ask you, Dan, is basically because, obviously that is a very interesting topic, running your own clinical research site. Coming from a CRA background, basically, obviously there's a bunch of qualifications I can imagine that I would have or some other CRA would have for running a site. But I want to get your take on it while I have you here and
Yeah.
put you in a spotlight here. What is your take on what's like the greatest uh, qualification that a CRA brings to the table? And then if you have time for a second question also is basically what's the area where a CRA needs to be aware that this is going to be stuff that I'm going to have to look into and to learn, and this is going to be basically where I'm not
Yeah, I mean,
proficiently at.
yeah, so CRAs are great. Like my biggest growing client for starting their own sites. We help clients all the time start their own sites, get studies, do the SOPs, all that stuff for them. Is actually surprisingly CRAs. And there's three types of people that want to start a site, from my experiences, right? They're just research naive business people, right? That just stumble into it, or
Hmm.
CRAs or coordinators, right? Which is number two, but I don't want to use my middle finger, Daniel, and flip you off. Okay. And number three is principal investigators. So those are the three type of people: someone that knows nothing about research,
Yeah.
someone that but has money, perhaps, someone that is experienced but not as at running a site necessarily, but they understand research, CRAs and coordinators, and then PIs. They have the patience, they have the qualifications, but they might be research naive as well. Well, the CRAs and the coordinators, their greatest asset obviously is their experience. Okay, they know what the sponsors want, they know what the CROs want. Your biggest the first thing you got to do when you start a site is get a study. Okay, without that you have nothing. You're not gonna have a business unless you get a study. The next thing you got to do is not lose that study. You got to keep that sponsor and CRO happy. It's like the rules of investing. Rule number one, don't lose money. Rule number two, don't forget rule number one, right? You don't want to lose the study. You're going to get a study, especially if you hire someone like myself or my company to do it for you. You're going to get studies. Can you keep them? I don't know. This is where the CRAs and the coordinators have the greatest advantage because they know exactly what it
Hmm.
takes to manage a study. They may not know how to recruit patients. The coordinators might, but they may not know or they may not have the time that a research naive person might have, right? Because they can't quit their day jobs necessarily. I know many CRAs who actually what they will do is they will work their job while creating their site, like while working on their site. They do both at the same time. So
Hmm.
your advantage is you know what the heck the sponsor wants. Your disadvantage
Yeah.
is you've been accustomed to getting everything sort of handed to you. Like these are our SOPs, you need to follow this. Perfect
Yeah.
example, I had a client yesterday. She's a senior CRA. She's starting a site. She got her first study. She says, hey, I don't want to do the study because they need a colonoscopy for the patients. And I said, oh, are you kidding me? What's the problem? Well, like, what? She's like, well, does the sponsor pay for it? How do I write an order? Like those little intangibles that
Yeah.
there are no right answers for, right? Another
Hmm.
example is how do I pay my PI? Well, the answer is there is no rule. So you can literally do anything you want. And that's where the
Hmm.
CRAs and the coordinators get into some issues is because they don't really know how to necessarily think creatively because they're used to just be
Hmm.
given handed templates and say, hey, fill this out, right? Like your
Yeah.
template. Well, there is no template for how to pay a PI. You got to negotiate. You got to be a salesperson. You got to figure out what works for them, what works for you, what makes sense, right? So those are the biggest advantages and disadvantages when CRAs decide to start their own sites. So good question.
But talking with somebody like you who's been doing it at several sites and for years, basically, then I can imagine, yeah, helps get over that threshold and more into the safe space of, okay, now I have a little bit more tools to work with and so forth and so on. Because, yeah, I can imagine it really must be quite a difference from, like you say, from working within a corporate environment with a bunch of SOPs for everything, moving on to yeah, basically the entrepreneurial
Mm-hmm.
life
Mm-hmm.
of yeah of discovering that in that kind of a world, life is a do-it-yourself
Very little
job.
structure, and any structure that you're going to create at your site is
Yeah.
going to be created by you. It's not going to be
Hmm.
given to you by someone. Even if you hire a consultant like myself, we'll give you systems to follow, but you got to do it, and then you got to tweak it to make sure that your staff is compliant and it actually works for you. Because what I created at one of my sites doesn't even work at my other site, and I'm the same owner, right? It's
Yeah.
just different people there,
Yeah.
different setup. So there is no cookie cutter approach, which is where I struggled because I started at the site level. Now I'm working backwards to the CRO, and I took on a CRA gig, and I'm actually not accustomed to structure. Like I
Hmm.
thrive when there's no structure.
Yeah.
So as a CRA, it's like horrible. So like watching this
Hmm.
video is going to be great for me because I'm just going to go back. Like I have to create the rules for what I'm doing. But when you're running a site, you are the one that is building the structure. No one's giving it to you, and that could be the hardest part.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, so I guess for somebody who likes to, on the other hand, I could think that that is kind of a plus for CRAs because they do tend to be people who are accustomed to thinking in a structured way. So it's more like getting your head around it, or for you to make it
Yep.
easier for them if they're in your
Yep.
site academy.
CRAs
Um,
are huge at this. We actually have a
yeah,
rule now at my investment company where we partner with the sites. We
yeah.
will only partner with a CRA or a coordinator because we've partnered with other people who are research naive and we can get them studies, but then they lose the study because they don't really understand what they're doing. With the CRAs and coordinators, that's not the case. It's just a matter of getting them up and running, right? And then they can
And
run it on their own.
I can imagine you giving them a framework from somebody who has experience is pretty much for those kind of people, CRAs, experience and study coordinators, enough to then work and fill in basically the blanks. Because that's also an analogy that I like to use for my clients, is the analogy of a Rubik's cube. And
Ah,
what I'll tell people is, and that's true. You can give somebody a scrambled up Rubik's cube who has like no idea and experience with Rubik's cubes, and they will be busy for hours to get that thing solved. Gun to their head, they have to. It's going to take hours. It's going to take hours. Now, people who are really quick at Rubik's cubes, that are trained on it, what they're trained on is pattern recognition of color alignments, and they know if they see a certain pattern, this is the next move. If they
mm,
then see another pattern, this is the next move. So they're trained on this pattern recognition, and you can literally blindfold somebody and give them a scrambled Rubik's cube, and he just makes one move, or she, and next to them have an expert, and he just says yes or no. Yes, move on to a next random move. No, reverse that move. A Rubik's Cube will be solved in 3 to 5 minutes. And the parallel that I see to your basically with sites and giving them the structure, and the same that I do with my CRA coaching, is there are certain structures out there in trials, for example. There's always a protocol. You always need a signature page. Everybody who's delegated IATA needs IATA training, and on and on. You always need to follow up on every email that you get. You always need to, and so forth and so on. There's this, and it's just as complex as a Rubik's Cube. And if you have like an 8 by 8 Rubik's Cube, kind of like that is like a
yeah.
clinical trial, and certainly the same with managing a site. But if you teach somebody how to work with those patterns, it's
Ah,
literally as if you go onto YouTube and you watch somebody solve Rubik's Cube in like 5.6 seconds.
yeah.
Everybody, layman's first impression is that's magic. Well, no,
Right.
it's not. No, it's not.
You're right.
It's about having years of experience where you can then, in hindsight and in investing a lot of time and thought into it, identify the patterns and set
You're
something up that
absolutely
works
right.
with patterns. And that's again why I tell my clients, if you want to gain years of experience first, before you then in hindsight can recognize all these patterns, um, knock yourself out. Sure, go ahead. If you want to learn the patterns right up front and work
Hmm.
that way, I would highly recommend that. And the same thing I would believe applies 100% to setting up like a site,
Hmm.
which is even more complex probably, because being a CRA is basically a part within the site tasks and so forth. No
Yeah.
marketing, no whatnot, and
More
budget
moving
is
parts here. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But even more important than basically to have somebody take you by the hand and show you in a structured way, hey, these are the patterns that you need
What
to
a
be
great
aware of.
analogy, Daniel. I'm going to start using that in my phone pitches now with prospective clients. We'll say,
Yeah,
I'll be
yeah.
your Rubik's Cube person that tells you yes or no when you're blindfolded. Because, perfect example, the first step you get a PI, but then not only get a PI with a private practice. So yes or no? Okay, you found a doctor. Does he or she have a private practice? Yes.
Hmm.
Continue. No. Go back and find another one. You can still use this one. You can use them as a
Hmm.
PI, but you need a doctor with patients. So excellent analogy. I love it, Daniel.
Yeah, and yeah, it's just across the board, and
That should be your
yeah, yeah.
logo, the Rubik's Cube with someone blindfolded. That'd be a cool logo, man.
Yeah, well, you told me you can get it done in $5. I
You
mean,
can
I
get it done
paid.
in $5.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So,
That one might
yeah.
be 20. It's a little more complex, but yeah, that would be
Ha,
good.
that's what I told you in the first interview. I want a $20 logo.
That's right.
You guys,
That's
you can go
right.
back to the first interview and verify that.
That's right. I've gotten
And
plenty of
actually,
those ones.
and it actually burned $29, but I like my
Ah,
logo. They
that's
really
good.
put out there what I wanted. Yeah,
That's good.
yeah. It's kind of like a circle and then an iconic person reaching out, and
Mm-hmm.
it really covers this 360 degrees. Got it covered,
I like
and
that.
then openness and the stress-free kind of feeling that comes across there.
Yeah, well, I really like. Thank you for your time. I got to run to LA, but we'll do more of these, man. This was the ISF. I'm sure you'll have other tips in future
Yeah,
videos, and then we'll relate
I
it to how CRAs can start their sites. Because I'm just surprised, man. Every month, like new CRA, hey, I want to start a site or I want to start a consulting company. And yes, you have plenty of advantages, but you have some
do.
disadvantages. Like, can you quit your job? Your job probably pays you really good. Like maybe you don't want to quit it, and then
Yeah,
you have less time, and now you need to hire someone, and now you need to manage them, right? So
yeah.
complexity galore, but it's very doable for anyone. You just take some discipline and learning the patterns, right? Pattern recognition.
Exactly. And if you want to stay as a CRA, reach out to me because the only reason I could imagine somebody would want to flee the job is the one problem every CRA has, stress.
Jeez.
That's what I knock off basically in one weekend. I know it sounds unbelievable, but I get the same feedback from every CRA, and some have been CRAs for 6 years, 3 years, major CROs. So yeah, absolutely,
Fantastic.
that is possible.
Fantastic, Daniel. Well, I appreciate it. Go to thecracoach.com, right?
Yep, that's my
And
website.
reach out to Daniel anytime. I'll have the links to his site underneath here and his LinkedIn. Are you on LinkedIn? You have a LinkedIn?
Well, under my name, yeah,
Okay,
Daniel Regut, Regut. Anybody can look me up
that's
there
right.
too.
That's
Hmm.
right. I'll link to
Yep.
your LinkedIn as well. Thank you, Daniel. We'll have you on again. This was great.
Thanks, Dan. Love it. And see you next time.
See
Take
you
care,
later,
guys and
Guru
girls.
Nation. Take care. Bye bye.